At that time, I lived in a post-war apartment building. This building is notable for having been constructed by German prisoners of war a few years after the war's end. The building is small, with only 2 entrances and 3 floors. It was built to last, and if it were not for the negligence of utility workers, it would likely still be in good condition today. There is also a basement in the building, which is luxurious by today's standards. Each of the 18 apartments on the basement floor has a separate room allocated to it. The basement will be discussed in more detail later. Our basement was noteworthy for occasionally turning into a swampy area that was impassable and emitted unpleasant odors, making it difficult to walk past even, let alone enter. Each time the utility workers performed their tasks, the unpleasant odors would temporarily disappear. However, despite the fact that if anyone asked any of the residents, none of them had ever seen these utility workers, the work was nonetheless completed. Another feature of our basement that we are proud of is its size. It consists of 19 separate rooms, excluding the corridor. The reason why the German builders decided to include an additional room in the design of the basement is unknown, as it took space away from 2 adjacent rooms. The door leading to this extra room was of high quality, with a 2-finger thick iron construction that had been corroded in some areas by rust. Despite being unlocked, the door would constantly walk around and slam against the walls, causing the occupants to flinch. The behavior of this particular door was difficult to understand. Indeed, where in a sealed room could such a strong air current originate to move a large door, such as that made of light plywood, with such force? On several occasions, the neighbors attempted to investigate the source of the draft, but their enthusiasm waned each time they approached the door in question. Perhaps it was due to the odor. The odor emanating from room 19 was especially unpleasant. Apparently, the responsibility for addressing the sewage system in that particular room did not lie with the Housing and Utilities Department, but rather, it was possible that the door itself was the source of concern. I had no desire to tamper with it, and it was not just any door. Circular-shaped metal rivets painted white were affixed to the corners and center of the door. The paint should have worn off over time, yet it appears that someone had been regularly recoating it. There was another reason why people were reluctant to explore: an oppressive sense of danger and fear. This feeling overcame the man as he took a few steps beyond the threshold of room 19. The fear that if he took any more steps, the door would shut with a dull thud and never open again kept him confined to the confines of the room. So we lived, pacing around the room along the opposite wall of the corridor. There lived a full-time alcoholic in our house. Everyone called him Uncle Fyodor. He was a kind-hearted man. When drunk, such individuals are overcome by an uncontrollable urge to do something. In one such emotional outburst, Uncle Fyodor decided to install a large padlock on the door. For good measure, he even managed to obtain welding equipment to attach the heavy hinges to the door. I must say that the individual in question completed their task. Excellent, indeed. However, as it later transpired, they did not possess the key to the lock. Nevertheless, we turned a blind eye to this minor detail, as clearly no one wished to enter the premises. The occupants breathed a noticeable sigh of relief. Now, I could descend to the basement without apprehension, which I did on a winter evening. I wished to treat myself to a jar of preserved pickles. Upon opening the door to the basement, I commenced descending the stairs, initially switching on the light in the hallway. As I proceeded, I observed how the light bulb began to flicker, threatening to abandon me in total darkness within minutes. I shivered with fear and decided to rush. As I passed the 19th door, I heard, from somewhere outside the house, strange sounds. It sounded like someone was moving a heavy object across the floor. After a few moments, the sound stopped, but I did not relax, as the sound continued to echo in my mind. I continued to the basement, unlocked the door, and began searching through the jars for tomatoes. I became so absorbed in my search that I lost track of time and came to my senses only a few minutes later, having failed to find any tomatoes. Instead, I decided to settle for cucumbers. I turned around to leave the basement and enter the hallway, but suddenly froze. I heard a faint, muffled thud, followed by another. It was a sound like something heavy was being moved. Someone noticed an obstacle that had not been present before and was now trying to determine the best way to eliminate it. As a result, I stood there holding a jar of cucumbers, afraid to move. I was certain that the sound originated from room 19, and I stood that way for several minutes, which felt like several hours to me. The noises became louder, the impacts on the door on the other side more violent and insistent. I cursed my indecision. I should have fled the basement as quickly as possible upon hearing the first impact. From this place of burial, where the Nazis had buried something that now sought release. Apparently, not for the first time, there was a grating sound with each impact. Something, in impotent rage, scratched at the iron of the door with its nails. If only the door had held, if only that drunk had done everything conscientiously. These thoughts filled my mind completely. After all, once the creature escaped, it would surely deduce from the light that there was someone in the basement. Abruptly, the noises ceased. The creature had realized that the barrier was insurmountable, or perhaps it had simply decided to rest. I realized that I would not have a second opportunity. I placed the jar on the shelf as discreetly as possible and prepared for what I believed would be the worst moments of my life. Quietly leaving the room and closing the door behind me, I faced the exit. My basement was located at the furthest end of this subterranean floor. To reach the upper levels from there, one must first walk 5 meters down the corridor, take a left turn, walk another 20 m, exit the vestibule, and climb the stairs. It was precisely in the second 20-meter section where the unwanted basement was located. The lighting was very dim, as several light bulbs had apparently already burned out and another couple of them were burning very faintly, threatening to extinguish at any moment. I tiptoed through the first 5-meter section and paused, gathering my composure. What should I do next? Should I run these 20 meters making a lot of noise, or should I carefully make my way along the wall making a minimum amount of noise? I decided to proceed with the second option, at least until there was clear danger. I walked the first few meters quite confidently, and even decided to slightly increase my pace. There were approximately 3 meters left until the 19th door, when I heard a new noise, after which my legs began to tremble and I had to slide down the wall to the floor. In order to avoid falling, I remained in that position for a few moments, after which, regardless of any other factors, I made a frantic effort to rush past the door, ascend the stairs, enter my home, retrieve the phone, and depart in order to spend the evening with a friend. Upon reflecting on this incident, it is challenging for me to determine which aspect frightened me more: the sound of the ground splitting apart, combined with the thudding of concrete. A hand, stained with a green, purulent-colored substance, protruded from under the door. The hand had 6 fingers with claws that resembled driven nails with bitten-off heads. Several years later, it was decided to construct new buildings in the area, as it was located near the very center of the city. The house in question was demolished and the residents were relocated. However, before the demolition, it was necessary to thoroughly inspect all the rooms in the house, including the basement, according to certain standards. As a result, the residents had no choice but to descend to the basement, despite the reluctance of a group of 5 strong men who claimed that there was nothing of significance down there. The group had spent a considerable amount of time trying to break off the lock of the basement door, but ultimately 2 individuals were forced by management to proceed. Apart from a foul odor, a collection of sewage waste, some decaying rags and rot, nothing else was found, save for a strange tunnel that emitted a draft and the scent of a graveyard. The tunnel sloped downward, so it was determined to fill it with a specialized mixture and disregard its existence, attributing it to an error by the home's architects.